Hello, I'm Amy Zawi with the Jerusalem Connection Red Alert Report for Wednesday, January 7th. Have you ever heard of a term called reparations? So here in the United States, we have a long-standing debate whether the white population of the U.S. should provide monetary reparations to the black population of the United States because of the evils of the days of slavery in American society, an evil that did end, thankfully, about 150 years ago. This debate comes up often loudly during presidential election cycles, and the argument is always one of not just the logistics of it, since many white families did not come to America till after the Civil War. Many in the North, of course, never owned slaves. Even several thousands of families in the South never owned any slaves. And then, of course, there's identifying and finding the descendants of these black slaves and how to ascertain their particular losses. I saw a YouTube a few weeks ago where Alan Dershowitz was at a college campus, and there was a student who got up, a pro-Palestinian student, who wanted to know what the Palestinians should do that were run from their homes and they deserve justice and so on. Well, Alan Dershowitz sort of gave her a move-on speech. He explained that the Jews that were persecuted, the ones who managed to survive the Holocaust camps or just escape Europe in general, don't run around, quote, with the keys to their apartments and homes located in Poland and Germany and other places demanding for their houses back. This horrible thing happened, and they got on with it, and they relocated and rebuilt their lives, often with the assistance of other people. Alan went on to explain that many of the Jews, most of them in Israel, legally purchased the land from absentee landlords and took arid or swampy plots of land and turned them into producing pieces of property. Not only that, the fact that the generations of refugees in the camps, in the Palestinian camps, are getting no help from their own brethren, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of Jews in other areas of the Middle East who were expelled from their homes and had to relocate in either Israel or the West. Well, there is indeed organizations who work tirelessly to find family treasures and heirlooms and assets that were seized by the Nazi regime and get them back to their rightful owners or their heirs. As well, organizations have existed to help resettle Jews and restart their lives after the Holocaust. And funding was set up in a variety of ways, not only to help them resettle in Israel, but in other nations. Of course, this all happened when the horror of the Holocaust was still fresh in people's minds. But history is slowly forgetting or eroding, whitewashing, or even erasing the history of what happened in the last century. Schools are removing any in-depth study of World War II and the Holocaust and the particular Jewish nature or the Jewish experience from those studies. I have seen textbooks that reduce the Holocaust to a single paragraph. Political pundits and politicians running for office and news organizations do not provide full context. They lie by omission, and they simply meet a current agenda with a new narrative. Then, of course, there was this press release last week by a German family, the Reimanns. They own a particular heavy portion of the Krispy Kreme Pret a Manger, an international food holding establishment. And this family offered to give several $millions to Holocaust survivors and supporting agency. Now, this is primarily to first-hand survivors, by the way, who did not even ask for it. This monetary reparation, so to speak, is in remorse for the family's support of the Nazi regime and ideology of death during World War II and the use of forced labor, which may have contributed to the organization's ultimate wealth. $5.5 million, which is about 5 million euros, is being given to the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany to help thousands of elderly survivors who live around the world. The Reimanns family has a holding company called the JAB Investors Group. The family established the Landecker Foundation in Berlin to oversee the efforts of distributing these funds. And this is named after a German Jew who was killed by the Nazis, and remarkably, the grandchildren of this gentleman owned a combined 45% stake of the JAB Investment Company, which in turn is owned by or organized by the Reimanns. The goal here was that the Rymans wanted to confront an emotional wake-up call for their family. In addition to the 5 million euros dedicated to the claims conference, which will be distributed to over 200 welfare agencies to provide relief, emergency financial relief for well over 10,000 elderly survivors that are average aged about 83. And then it will also provide enough funding for an additional 3,000 Holocaust survivors to get other kinds of financial assistance. These Holocaust survivors are located in about 34 countries. In addition to that, they will put another $25 million per year into education programs for the study of the Holocaust, which will indeed help promote awareness and get people back to the idea of never again and not letting people creep back into the old ways of anti-Semitism, which we are watching on the rise right now. This announcement of these fundings and donations of these organizations comes after the Ryman family earlier in 2019 commissioned a study on its own family's involvement in the Nazi regime. To me, this example of what this family is doing is an earnest attempt to repent from the evils of the past and use its resources to move people forward. No government forced this donation or mandated this contribution, and no receiver requested it or demanded it either. To me, this is a great illustration of how God works with us. He does not force us to obey His will, but when we do, we may receive blessings in the most interesting and unexpected ways that we've never even asked for. I bring this story to your attention here in our venue where we talk about BDS and anti-Semitism exposed around the world, because as we start 2020, this story was a huge blessing and ray of hope to see that those with wealth and power and even a sketchy past can make a turn for truth and justice, and to move the world forward and make it better. And this, to me, is something that I believe God would approve of. Shavua Tov, have a great week, and again, welcome to 2020.